Hey everyone, welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love bold and beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in.
Rich Forrester's life had always been a tangled web of love, betrayal, ambition, and heartbreak, but nothing could have prepared anyone for the moment he uttered those 5 shocking words that would send shockwaves through every corner of his family and leave Taylor in an emotional puddle on the floor, tears streaming down her face in a way that made even the most stoic observers pause in stunned silence. It was a quiet afternoon at Forrester Creations, the air heavy with the kind of tension that only comes from unspoken truths hanging precariously between two people who had shared decades of joy, grief, and intimate confessions, and yet, somehow, Ridge's gaze was distant, almost imperceptibly cold, as if a part of him had already checked out of the moment entirely, leaving Taylor clutching her heart, unsure whether she was witnessing a fracture in their marriage or the crumbling of an entire lifetime of shared dreams. She had come to him that morning with the kind of hopeful optimism that only someone utterly devoted to a partner could muster, thinking that perhaps, after the chaos of the past months, the relentless back and forth with Brooke, the lingering doubts about their future, the endless pressure of maintaining appearances while their hearts were secretly shattering, they could finally find a fleeting moment of clarity, a pause from the storm to reaffirm that what they had was real, that it was worth fighting for despite every misstep, every betrayal, every tear-stained night that had defined their love story. But Ridge's words, delivered with a calm finality that betrayed none of the emotion she so desperately wished to see, struck her like a physical blow, reverberating in her ears long after he had finished speaking. 5 seemingly simple words that carried the weight of decades of unspoken resentment, miscommunication, and impossible expectations. 5 words that encapsulated an ending she had never anticipated. 5 words that shattered her carefully constructed world in a heartbeat. She sank to her knees, trembling, as memories of their shared past, the stolen glances across boardroom tables, the whispered confessions in quiet bedrooms, the comfort of knowing someone would always stand beside her no matter the consequences, flashed through her mind in a blur of color and emotion, each one a cruel reminder of what was now slipping through her fingers like sand, impossible to grasp and impossible to undo, while Ridge, the man she had loved with an intensity that defied reason, stood there silently, a mixture of sorrow, regret, and an undeniable resolve etched into his features, the quiet dignity of his departure only making the scene all the more unbearable as she struggled to find words, any words, to halt the inexorable tide of his exit. The air between them was thick with the unspoken, with the things that could not be undone, the things that had been said and left unsaid, the lifetime of what-ifs that would now follow them into separate paths. And Taylor, for all her composure, all her decades of experience navigating the stormy waters of love and loss in the Forrester family, found herself utterly undone, her body racked with sobs, her voice catching in her throat as she whispered his name in disbelief, in anguish, in the faint, futile hope that somehow, against all odds, he would turn back, apologize, explain, or at least acknowledge the depth of her pain. But Ridge, with a quiet finality that was as heartbreaking as it was infuriating, simply shook his head, offered a lingering glance filled with unspoken meaning, and walked out, leaving a void that Taylor had never anticipated, a silence that screamed louder than any argument, any confrontation, any fight. And as the echo of the closing door reverberated through the house, she collapsed completely, the tears flowing freely now, her heart aching not just for the man who had left but for the life they had shared, the future they had planned, the family they had built, all of it now hanging in the balance, uncertain and fragile, while in that moment, viewers across Los Angeles and beyond, wherever fans of the bold and the beautiful had gathered, felt the full force of Ridge's devastating choice, the impact of those 5 words, the raw, searing heartbreak of Taylor as she faced a future without him, and the scene, so expertly wrought with emotional tension, set the stage for weeks if not months, of explosive fallout, whispered speculations and dramatic confrontations, all revolving around the man who, despite every misstep, every betrayal, every heartbreak he had endured, still commanded the attention, love, and fury of those around him, leaving audiences glued to their screens, hearts clenched in empathy and frustration, desperately trying to process not just what had happened in that single, defining moment, but what it would mean for the Forrester family, the future of the company, and the lives of everyone who had ever dared to love Ridge Forrester with the same unrelenting passion that Taylor had, a love that, despite everything, still burned fiercely even in the wake of such unimaginable emotional devastation. As Taylor's body shook with the force of her sobs, memories of their shared past flooded her mind with a relentless, almost cruel intensity, each recollection a dagger to her already fractured heart. The nights when Ridge had held her close after a business disaster, murmuring promises that he would always protect her, the whispered words of affection in quiet hallways when no one else was watching, the small gestures that had once made her feel like she mattered more than the world itself, all now tainted by the knowledge that those moments, as beautiful and genuine as they had seemed, could not shield her from the crushing reality of the man who had just walked out the door, leaving her to grapple with a silence that was deafening, a void that seemed infinite, and a sense of betrayal so profound that even her decades of experience navigating the complexities of love and heartbreak in the Forrester family could not prepare her for it. She clutched at the remnants of the conversation, replaying Ridge's words over and over in her mind, each repetition slicing deeper into her psyche, the cadence of his voice, the subtle inflection, the quiet resolve behind the seemingly simple 5 words. They were like poison, leaving a bitter taste that refused to fade, while every rational part of her mind tried to reconcile the impossibility of it all, the sheer unfairness of a man who had once been her entire world now standing on the other side of the threshold, his figure shrinking as he disappeared down the hall, taking with him not just his presence but a part of her very soul, leaving her gasping, broken, and utterly unmoored. And yet, even amidst the tidal wave of grief, anger, and disbelief, a small, stubborn part of Taylor refused to succumb entirely, the voice in her head that had guided her through so many storms whispering that she could endure this too, that heartbreak, however excruciating, was not the end of her story, and that Ridge, for all his brilliance, charm, and undeniable magnetism, was not the arbiter of her worth, nor the ultimate measure of the life she had fought so hard to build for herself and for their family, a truth she clung to even as her tears blurred the edges of her vision, and her chest ached with the effort of each ragged breath. Meanwhile, Ridge's departure was not just a physical absence, but an emotional earthquake that rippled through every corner of the Forrester household, where staff, family, and friends all sensed the tremors of a love tested beyond measure, aware that the quiet dignity with which Ridge had left spoke volumes, that the finality in his posture and the resolute calm in his expression were signs of a man wrestling with his own demons, even as he inflicted such profound pain on the person who had stood by him through every triumph and disaster. Within moments, whispers began to circulate among those who had witnessed the scene, hushed exchanges that speculated on the nature of Ridge's 5 words, on what could have prompted such a dramatic and emotionally charged exit, and on what the implications might be for the delicate equilibrium of Forrester Creations, where personal and professional lives were so tightly interwoven that a rupture in one inevitably threatened the other, leaving colleagues to wonder how they could navigate the coming days, the tension palpable in the air, a reflection of the storm that now raged behind closed doors, where Taylor remained on her knees, her mind a jumble of questions, doubts, and aching memories. She thought of the years she had invested in not just Ridge but in the family they had built, the home they had shared, the countless hours of support, comfort, and counsel she had offered him during his darkest moments, and how all of that now seemed to hang in limbo, suspended over the chasm created by a few, devastatingly simple words, words that carried with them the weight of rejection, finality, and a future she could no longer envision with him at the center, a reality that was almost impossible to accept yet undeniable in its starkness. And as she sat there, trembling, her mind wandered to the difficult conversations that lay ahead, the family members who would inevitably demand answers, the impossible task of explaining to her children, friends, and colleagues what had transpired without exposing herself to further vulnerability, the pressure almost suffocating in its intensity. Yet Taylor, for all her despair, understood that she could not allow herself to remain paralyzed, that the strength that had carried her through decades of love, loss, and relentless challenges would have to rise once again if she hoped to navigate this storm with dignity and grace, even if it meant confronting Ridge later, even if it meant demanding explanations that he seemed unwilling to offer, even if it meant facing a heartache so deep that it threatened to consume her entirely. Ridge, meanwhile, as he walked through the familiar halls of Forrester Creations, felt the weight of his own decisions pressing down upon him like an invisible vice, the burden of responsibility, of love, of legacy intertwining with the sting of regret, and the bittersweet satisfaction of doing what he believed to be necessary. A paradox that defined him as both hero and antagonist in the ongoing drama of his life, aware that each step he took away from Taylor carried consequences far beyond the immediate moment, that his actions would set off a cascade of emotional reactions, ripple through relationships, and challenge the very foundation of loyalty, trust, and understanding that the Forrester family had spent decades carefully constructing. Yet Ridge also recognized a truth he could not ignore. Sometimes love required courage not just to embrace but to release, to step away when remaining felt like a betrayal of oneself, a concept Taylor, despite her own heartbreak, would one day, he hoped, come to understand. The dichotomy of Ridge's choice, the simultaneous cruelty and necessity of his words, was a tension that few could comprehend, a delicate balance between heartache and integrity, leaving Taylor in the immediate aftermath to wrestle with her own feelings of abandonment, disbelief, anger, and lingering affection, while Ridge, moving further from the epicenter of her grief, carried with him a quiet, resolute pain, an understanding that while the scene had ended with him walking out, the story between them was far from over. The echoes of those 5 shocking words destined to reverberate through every future encounter, every boardroom meeting, every private moment they might one day share again. The emotional fallout stretching like a storm cloud over Los Angeles, forewarning a tempest of confrontation, reconciliation, or even further heartbreak. And as the day wore on, Taylor, still on her knees, slowly raised her tear-streaked face, her resolve strengthening even as the ache remained, aware that she had loved deeply, suffered profoundly, and would continue to navigate the treacherous waters of her heart, because love, in all its beauty and pain, had always been worth the risk, even when the man she had trusted most had chosen to walk away. And yet, as Taylor gradually pushed herself upright, still trembling, still raw from the initial shock of Ridge's departure, she realized that the storm raging inside her was mirrored by a subtle but unmistakable tension in the house. A tension she had felt growing for weeks, maybe months, a warning that cracks had begun forming in the very foundation of her life with Ridge, cracks that his 5 shocking words had now exposed in the most public and devastating way possible, leaving her to wrestle not just with the personal pain of rejection but with the gnawing, almost suffocating awareness that their professional and familial world, carefully curated over decades, was also teetering on the edge of chaos, and Taylor, as she clutched the arms of the chair she had collapsed into moments before, could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down upon her, a reminder that she was not only Ridge's partner but a matriarch of sorts, someone whose composure and judgment would now be scrutinized, questioned, and perhaps even blamed by the rest of the family who, in their own ways, were already beginning to sense that a major shift had occurred, one that would inevitably disrupt their delicate balance. Her thoughts inevitably drifted to Brooke, to Steffi, to the countless others whose lives intersected with Ridge and hers in ways that were both intimate and painfully intertwined, and she wondered how they would react once they learned the truth, how Ridge's departure and his ominous 5 words would ripple outward like shockwaves across every relationship they had built, every friendship forged, every alliance formed and tested in the high-stakes, drama-filled world of Forrester Creations, where personal feelings so often collided with professional ambition, and where love, loyalty, and heartbreak were in constant, volatile conflict, making even the simplest emotional rupture feel like a monumental event that could redefine the lives of everyone involved. Taylor's mind swirled with memories, not just of love and passion but of the countless trials she and Ridge had endured together, the betrayals and reconciliations, the moments of triumph and devastating loss, the children they had nurtured, the decisions they had made both together and apart, and how each of those moments had shaped not only their own lives but the trajectory of the Forrester legacy itself, a legacy now threatened by a single, powerful decision, a phrase that had left Taylor shattered. questioning everything she had known, everything she had believed, and everything she had worked so hard to protect. And yet, amid the torrent of emotion, a spark of clarity began to emerge, faint but undeniable, a recognition that she could not allow Ridge's departure, however shocking, to define her, to strip her of the strength, resilience, and wisdom she had accumulated over a lifetime, that while heartbreak was inevitable in a life filled with love, the ability to endure it, to rise from it, and to channel it into something constructive was what truly defined her. And so, even as the tears continued to flow, even as her chest ached with the memory of his absence, Taylor allowed herself to breathe, to center herself, to acknowledge the pain without surrendering to it entirely, understanding that the coming days, weeks, and months would demand not just emotional fortitude, but also strategic thinking, careful communication, and a steady hand, qualities she had long relied upon in both her personal and professional life, and qualities that would now be tested in ways she had never imagined. Meanwhile, Ridge's own journey through the hallway, down the familiar corridors of the family empire they had built together, and out into the brisk Los Angeles air, was no less tumultuous, a complex interplay of guilt, resolve, fear, and a painful recognition that love sometimes demanded actions that were paradoxically both selfless and devastating. And as he walked, memories of his own life with Taylor pressed upon him. The quiet mornings in bed sharing coffee, the laughter of their children echoing through the house, the comfort of mutual understanding after storms both literal and metaphorical, and the knowledge that even now, despite the irrevocable weight of his words, his love for Taylor remained as potent and conflicted as ever, a truth he could neither deny nor fully reconcile with the reality of the choice he had just made, a choice that would alter the course of their lives and the lives of everyone connected to them in ways he could only begin to anticipate. And as Ridge moved further from the scene, a subtle tension in the air suggested that the Forrester family, for all its resilience and sophistication, was about to be thrown into the kind of emotional and professional upheaval that had defined their saga for decades, a series of dominoes waiting to topple in succession, from Brooke's likely intervention and probing questions to Steffi's inevitable protective instincts over family matters, to the extended network of executives, designers,